The waves rolled dark and heavy across the Atlantic, their endless rhythm masking the silence left behind by those who had vanished here. The Bermuda Triangle had earned its name through centuries of whispered legend, yet for Dr. Elias Ward, it was more than a mystery. It was a scar carved into his life. His father's ship had disappeared inside these waters when Elias was 8, and the absence of answers had festered into a lifelong obsession. Now, standing on the steel deck of the Nereus, a vessel bristling with sensors and instruments of his own design, he felt that obsession sharpen into purpose. He was not here to chase myths. He was here to drag the truth from the ocean's grip. Captain Marcus Hale watched him with a sailor's skepticism. Hale had spent half his life steering ships through storms and war, and he trusted nothing but hard wood, taut sails, and the instincts of his gut. "You're staring like it's going to open up and swallow us whole," Hale muttered, his gravel voice carrying the fatigue of countless voyages. Elias did not look away from the horizon. "It might," he replied flatly. The captain frowned, already questioning why he had agreed to this mission. Lieutenant Carter Briggs stood rigid at the rail, his military uniform sharp despite the salt spray. The youngest aboard but already weathered by combat tours, Briggs had been assigned as the government's watchdog. His orders were clear. Monitor Ward, ensure no unauthorized discoveries left the Triangle, and bring back a report. To him, Ward was a dangerous dreamer, one step away from dragging them into a graveyard built on superstition. He distrusted science that bent toward obsession. Only Julian Rose seemed immune to the weight of the journey. Tall, lanky, and perpetually distracted, he balanced a notebook on his knee and scribbled equations even as the deck shifted beneath his boots. Rose's mind saw patterns where others saw chaos, and though his brilliance was undeniable, so was his eccentricity. He had been Ward's only true ally since university days, bound by curiosity and a fondness for ideas that brushed against the impossible. The Nereus pressed deeper into the Triangle, its sensors registering erratic bursts of energy. Monitors flickered in the control room, tracing electromagnetic surges that pulsed with unnatural regularity. Ward leaned over the screens, his eyes alive with vindication. "It's patterned," he whispered. "Not random. A lattice buried in the waves themselves." Hale folded his arms. "Storms have patterns too. Doesn't mean they're speaking to you." But Roe, squinting at the data, murmured, "No storm repeats prime intervals, Marcus. Something out there is counting." The atmosphere aboard tightened. Briggs prowled the corridors, watching Ward with barely concealed suspicion. "Tell me, Doctor," he said one night as the ship rocked beneath the moon, "if you're wrong, what then? We risked lives and millions of taxpayer dollars on your hunch." Ward's gaze hardened. "If I'm wrong, we go home. If I'm right, then the world changes forever." The conviction in his voice unsettled Briggs more than any doubt could have. 2 days into the mission, the sea betrayed its calm. Clouds gathered on the horizon with unnatural speed, piling black upon black until the sky was a wall. The winds rose without warning, tearing at sails and thrumming through steel. Hale bellowed orders, his voice cutting across the chaos as sailors scrambled to secure the deck. The Nereus groaned under the storm's weight, every rivet straining. But to Ward, the storm was not weather, it was design. He stood firm against the spray, hair plastered to his forehead, and whispered to himself, "It's happening." Lightning cracked across the sky, but its angles were wrong, too symmetrical, too deliberate. Rose shouted over the thunder, notebook abandoned as he clung to the railing. "Elias." The pulses, it's harmonizing with the storm. "We're in the middle of a frequency lock." Briggs grabbed Ward by the arm, fury in his eyes. "You brought us into a trap." Ward shook him off, his voice eerily calm.
"No.
"I brought us to the threshold." The storm reached its crescendo, waves rising higher than the masts. The sea itself seemed to tear open, light spilling from its depths like a wound. Instruments screamed as compasses spun uselessly and screens went blind. Hale fought the wheel with every ounce of his strength, but the ship no longer obeyed the laws of ocean or wind. The Nereus was being pulled, dragged downward not by water, but by something beneath reality. In the chaos, there was a stillness in Ward's expression. This was the moment he had chased all his life, the maw that had taken his father, now opening before him. Fear gnawed at the edges of his mind, but beneath it lay triumph. "It isn't a storm," he said, voice steady though the ship shuddered. "It's a gate." The words hung in the air as the Nereus plunged into the impossible light, swallowed whole by the triangle's secret. The light receded as suddenly as it had come, leaving only silence and the hush of water lapping gently against steel. The crew of the Nereus staggered to their feet, blinking at a horizon that was not their own. Above them stretched a sky split by twin suns, one golden and steady, the other pale and cold. The air was warm, heavy with a salt tang that hinted at oceans yet not quite of earth. Captain Hale gripped the railing, his sailor's instincts recoiling. "This isn't home," he muttered, though his tone made it sound like a curse. Dr. Elias Ward's eyes drank in the alien vista with a strange calm. For years he had prepared for the possibility of discovery, and now that it stood before him, awe drowned out fear. "We've crossed," he said softly. "We're not in the Atlantic anymore." He ran his fingers over a trembling console, noting that half the ship's instruments had gone dark, fried by the passage. The others who had followed him here were not soothed by his certainty. Lieutenant Briggs stepped forward, face hard, one hand never far from the pistol strapped to his hip. "Where the hell did you bring us, Doctor?" His words cut like steel. "That wasn't a storm. That was this." He gestured at the sky, at the alien waters stretching endlessly around them. "You knew something like this would happen." Ward's gaze flicked toward him, unreadable. "I suspected there was a mechanism," he admitted. "I didn't know it would take us so far." Julian Rowe, his lanky frame hunched over a half-functioning monitor, interrupted with a mutter that carried more excitement than fear. "Look at this." He turned the display so they could see faint spikes of radiation, a rhythm buried in the noise. "Prime sequences again. Perfectly ordered. Something here is speaking, or was speaking once." His words carried a tremor of wonder. Hale shot him a glare. "Speaking or not, I want to know how we sail back out." The ship drifted in currents that tugged at them strangely, as though gravity itself bent differently here. The water glowed faintly beneath the surface, patches of bioluminescence stretching into geometric shapes far too precise to be natural. As night approached, or what passed for it beneath the dimming of the colder sun, vast ruins shimmered in the deep. Towering structures like crystalline pyramids, encrusted with coral and thyme, rose from the seabed. The crew leaned over the rails, struck dumb. Ward's voice was hushed, reverent. "They built this." No one needed him to say who they were. Humanity had speculated for centuries about the possibility of others. The Bermuda Triangle, the disappearances, all of it suddenly reframed as deliberate design. He whispered, almost to himself, "This is not a graveyard. It's a collection." The tension among them thickened as the implications took hold. Hale wanted to set course for open water, trusting that persistence might carry them to the anomaly again. Briggs insisted they should avoid deeper entanglement, warning that if there were builders or their descendants, they might already be watching. Rowe argued the opposite, leaning on the rail with manic intensity. "If this is a collection, then there are records, artifacts, evidence. We could be the first to prove humanity isn't alone." Their arguments were cut short when a shape appeared on the horizon, gliding silently toward them. At first it seemed to be another ship, but as it drew closer its nature became impossible to deny. The object was vast, metallic yet fluid in design, its hull shifting like liquid glass. It bore no sails, no engines, and yet it skimmed across the water faster than any craft of Earth. The men froze, a hush falling across the deck. The vessel did not attack. Instead, it circled them once, scanning beams of pale light washing over the Nereus. Instruments flickered in response, unreadable symbols cascading across damaged screens. Rowe whispered, half in awe, "It's cataloging us." Briggs's jaw tightened, his hand drifting to his weapon again. Like insects in a jar. As quickly as it had come, The vessel slipped beneath the surface, vanishing into the glowing depths. Silence reclaimed the sea, but it was no longer the same silence. The crew knew now they were not alone. Hale exhaled slowly, every instinct screaming retreat. That wasn't weather, and it wasn't chance. Something here knows we're trespassing. Ward stared at the water, torn between dread and exhilaration. The Nereus rocked gently in the alien current, surrounded by ruins that whispered of civilizations long gone. He turned to the others, his voice quiet but edged with unshakable certainty. We've found the heart of the triangle, and it knows we're here. From below, the water pulsed with light, spreading outward in a pattern like the ripple of a heartbeat. Whatever intelligence lingered in this place had awakened, and its attention had settled firmly on them. You said. The first pulse shook the Nereus as though a giant hand had struck the hull. Men staggered across the deck while lights flickered, the ship's surviving instruments shrieking under the strain. The sea beneath them boiled with brilliance, and then the alien vessel returned, not gliding this time, but rising impossibly out of the water like a leviathan of steel and glass. Captain Hale gripped the wheel, though he knew it was useless. The current no longer obeyed his commands. "Hold fast," he shouted, voice hoarse. The ship shuddered again, lifted by unseen forces. Ropes snapped, metal groaned, and in the next instant they were no longer sailing, but being carried. The Nereus descended into an immense cavern beneath the sea, the water parting with an unnatural grace to admit them. Walls of crystal and metal spiraled upward, glowing with veins of light that throbbed in synchrony with the pulses that had ensnared them. The ship settled gently into a vast chamber where the ocean hung suspended overhead, defying gravity. The men could scarcely breathe for the sight of it. Dr. Elias Ward felt his pulse quicken. At last he was inside the machine of his obsession. He stepped forward to the rail as luminous figures began to take form in the air, projections, shimmering and translucent, humanoid yet distinctly alien. Their faces bore no detail, their eyes little more than orbs of fire, but their presence radiated ancient authority. One of the apparitions spoke, its voice resonating without sound, felt more than heard. "Travelers of soul, you have entered the archive." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but none spoke. The figure continued, "For epochs uncounted, we have preserved the vessels of your kind. Those who wander the threshold are tested, weighed, and measured. Few comprehend, fewer return." Briggs stepped forward, defiance in every line of his posture. "Tested for what?" he demanded. His words echoed in the cavern as if carried deliberately. Another figure answered, "For resilience, for ingenuity, for the will to endure when reason falters. The threshold does not suffer weakness to pass." The lieutenant's jaw clenched, but he said no more. Rowe, trembling but unable to silence his mind, whispered, "The prime sequences. The pulses. You've been signaling all along, waiting for someone to solve it." His awe drew the attention of the luminous beings. "Correct," one intoned. "Signals to invite, riddles to prepare. Your kind has answered in fragments, yet never wholly." Ward's chest tightened at the words. "My father," he said, voice low. "You took him. His ship vanished here decades ago." The apparition shifted, and for a brief moment an image flickered behind them. The outline of a submarine resting intact in the archive's depths, its crew forever silent. The meaning was unmistakable. Ward's hands curled into fists, but he did not look away. "So they failed your test. And you kept them like trophies?" "No," the voice corrected, devoid of malice. "We preserved what your world would have lost. They could not complete the passage, and so they remained." The implication was cold comfort, but it steeled the men against the truth. Survival here depended on proving themselves. Suddenly the chamber itself shifted. The Nereus rocked as platforms rose from the depths, vast and gleaming, etched with shifting symbols. The apparition spoke again. "To return, you must endure what is required. Each challenge reveals the measure of your kind." The first trial came without warning. Water surged upward from hidden conduits, flooding the chamber with terrifying speed. The ship was caught in a whirlpool, pulled toward a narrowing vortex that promised to crush steel like paper. Hale roared orders, his instincts as captain guiding men to haul ropes, shift ballast, and fight against currents with everything they had. His voice carried the force of command, and though fear threatened to paralyze them, the crew obeyed. Under his guidance, the Nereus rode the turbulence rather than resisting, skimming just beyond destruction until the vortex subsided. The chamber stilled, and one apparition declared, "Leadership. Tested. Proven." The second trial came as platforms extended, bearing alien puzzles of shifting light and geometry. Symbols rearranged themselves in dizzying succession, mocking comprehension. Rose stumbled forward, his mind racing faster than his words. It's not language, it's logic. A sequence, recursive. He fell into the problem like a diver into deep water, muttering equations, erasing, redrawing in the air with trembling fingers. Sweat poured down his face as minutes stretched. When at last the symbols aligned into a perfect symmetry, the platforms sank and the lights dimmed. Intellect. Tested. Proven. But the third trial struck at the heart. The cavern darkened, and suddenly the crew were shown illusions, visions of their lives, their failures, their deepest regrets. Briggs staggered back as the memory of a fallen comrade clawed at him, the guilt he had buried rising like a wave. Ward froze at the sight of his father, hand outstretched from the depths, accusing him of obsession that had cost countless others. Hale gritted his teeth as the phantom faces of sailors he had lost to storms whispered his name. They struggled, each man fighting the weight of memory that threatened to break them more surely than water or logic. It was Briggs who broke the silence, his voice ragged but fierce. "These aren't truths. They're chains. And we don't wear chains." He forced himself forward, through the illusions, daring them to hold him back. One by one the others followed, shaking off grief, shame, and doubt, until only Ward remained. His father's face lingered, close enough to touch. For a moment he wavered. Then, with a shuddering breath, he stepped through the vision, leaving it to dissolve into nothingness. The apparitions flared brighter. Will. Tested. Proven. The chamber quieted. The trials were complete, yet no release came. Instead, the figures gathered as one, their voices weaving into a single resonance. You have endured. You are unlike those before you. Humanity resists control, bends rules, defies inevitability. This quality is dangerous and powerful. Ward stepped forward, his voice low but carrying across the cavern. Then let us return. We are not your specimens. We are not your trophies. We are men, and our place is with our world. The apparitions shimmered, their forms unstable, as though considering. Finally they spoke again. A choice remains. Return to soul, and bear only memory. Or remain, and claim the knowledge we keep. But know this, one path closes forever when the other is taken. The words fell over them like a sentence. The cavern dimmed, the air heavy with expectation. The choice that waited would divide them, perhaps even destroy them. And yet it was clear. The triangle's mystery had never been about disappearance, but about decision. You said. The silence after the ultimatum was heavier than any storm. The chamber's lights dimmed to a dull glow, casting the men's faces in stark relief, as though the archive itself were waiting for their answer. Captain Hale was the first to speak, his voice steady despite the weight pressing on them. We go home. Whatever they're offering, it isn't ours to take. Our duty's back there. His hand gestured vaguely toward the unseen Atlantic, but his eyes never left Ward's. Ward stood rigid, every nerve pulled taut. For him, the decision was no abstraction. All his life had been bent toward this discovery, every sacrifice leading to the cavern in which he now stood. He could almost feel the knowledge pressing against the walls around him, secrets of the cosmos, technologies to unshackle humanity from the bounds of Earth. He imagined his father's voice urging him to seize it, to finish what had begun with that vanished voyage. And yet another part of him whispered that the hunger itself had already claimed too much. Lieutenant Briggs broke the silence next, his tone sharp with contempt. You don't see it, do you? This isn't generosity. It's a leash. They'll dress it up as wisdom, but it's control. You take their gift, you bend to their terms. He glanced between Ward and Hale, his words measured but heated. You want to honor the dead? Go back and tell the truth. That's how you honor them. Julian Rowe, usually the least grounded among them, surprised everyone by siding firmly with Hale. His wiry hands fidgeted, but his voice was clear. Knowledge is meaningless if it consumes us. We're alive, Elias. That's the miracle. And if no one makes it home to carry the story, then everything we've endured dies here. His wide eyes met Ward's, full of both urgency and friendship. Don't throw away our survival for a library we can't even comprehend. Ward's chest tightened. He saw his companions as if for the first time, not obstacles to his mission, but men who had risked everything alongside him. Hale, who had kept them alive through chaos. Briggs, who carried scars of battles no one else could understand. Rowe, whose eccentric brilliance had cracked puzzles no machine could solve. And himself, driven by ghosts and obsession. The archive had tested them all, but the final trial was his alone, to choose between obsession and belonging. The apparitions shimmered, waiting. Ward closed his eyes, the phantom memory of his father's outstretched hand lingering in his mind. He breathed deeply, then opened them again, gaze steady. We go home, he said at last. Whatever waits here, it isn't ours. Humanity's strength is to face the unknown together, not to hide behind another's shadow. The cavern trembled, as though the very architecture reacted to his decision. The apparitions wavered, their once calm voices layered with something close to unease. So be it. The gate shall open. But know this, you walk away from power few would deny. Hale gave a grim smile. We've denied worse. Open the door. The floor beneath them split, revealing a swirling column of light that stretched downward into unfathomable depths. The Nereus lurched as currents gripped her hull, dragging her toward the vortex. Hale seized the wheel once more, every instinct honed by years at sea guiding his hands. Hold her steady, he roared, and the men scrambled to stations, strapping themselves down against the pole. The vortex tightened, walls of energy grinding against steel, tearing bolts loose, smashing crates across the deck. Rowe clung to a console, his face pale but mind still racing. The frequency, it's fluctuating. If it collapses before we pass, we'll be crushed. Ward dove beside him, fingers flying across cracked keys, overriding systems to stabilize the surge. Sparks lit the cabin, but together they coaxed the failing instruments to match the rhythm of the gate. Briggs forced his way to the rail, bracing himself against the gale as he spotted a fracture opening above. That's it. The exit. His voice was nearly torn away by the roar. Hale angled the ship with surgical precision, teeth bared as he wrestled the wheel. Then let's give a hell. The Nereus plunged upward through the fracture, light consuming every sense. For a heartbeat the world ceased to exist, and then, with a deafening crack, they broke through. The storm that had claimed them raged no more. The Atlantic lay calm and familiar under a gray dawn sky. Their instruments, dead for so long, blinked back to life as though nothing had happened. The chronometer read mere minutes past the hour of their disappearance. For a long moment, no one spoke. The men stood in stunned silence, the weight of survival heavy on their shoulders. Then Hale let out a laugh, raw and triumphant, and the tension broke. Rowe collapsed against the console, laughing shakily with him. Briggs leaned on the rail, staring at the familiar sea with relief he would never admit aloud. Ward remained at the bow, his eyes fixed on the horizon where sea met sky. The temptation of the archive still burned in him, the ache of unanswered questions lingering like an ember. But he felt, too, the strength of the men behind him, their survival earned not through alien gifts but through stubborn human defiance. His father's absence would always remain, but the choice to return had been his own, and it was the only way forward. He drew a breath of familiar salt air and spoke, not to the others, but to the ocean itself. "It wasn't a curse," he murmured. "It was a mirror, and we're ready for what it showed us." The sea rolled on, vast and indifferent, its secrets no less deep than before. But for the men of the Nereus, the mystery of the triangle was no longer a void of fear. It was a testament. Humanity could walk into the unknown and return stronger, unbroken, and unwilling to bow. Their ship cut across the water, battered but alive, carrying them home with a truth no storm could ever drown.